Let's say good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. We'll wait just a minute to let people log on, and we will get going in a few minutes. It's good to be back on. We missed the last few days. We had no power on Monday, no internet. I'm sorry, we had power but no internet. And then yesterday, it was in and out, and we couldn't get a good signal, so I didn't want to come on for 5 minutes and get disconnected again. So just a quick update, because people ask me about this all the time. I did buy a bunch of Amazon stock today. I'm getting killed on it right now, but I'm not worried. Amazon's a good company. To those that know that I was holding American Airlines, that had a really good day, but I'm still down on that too. So I tell you when I win, when my picks are good. I'm also telling you when my picks are bad. Although Amazon, you can hold that forever. Amazon did $125 billion in a quarter. It had their earnings last night, $125 billion in a quarter, 3 months. That's unreal. It's just crazy how big that company has gotten. And it's down today because Jeff Bezos, the head, is stepping down. He's really not. He's just moving to another position, which he's pretty much had for the last 4 or 5 years anyway. So it'll drop. I think it comes back. And so I bought some Amazon. But anyway, I only say that because people do ask me. I'm not a financial advisor. Don't follow me for any reason for planning, but that's just what I do. At some point in the future, we've had discussions about doing like a small account that we show every day, like how we're doing, and compare it to other people. Financial literacy is kind of a passion for me. It's something that means a lot. I think it is the great equalizer when it comes to so many of the issues that we face, social issues that we face, and racial issues that we face. If people all knew finance and understood it and took advantage of it, we'd be in different places in life. And so this was a great week to see that. We saw the whole Robinhood fiasco, this whole GameStop fiasco, which is kind of still going on. It's a little crazy, but it looks like the volatility has dropped off. I did not buy any GameStop. The only thing I wish I could have done was shorted it, and I was not able to short it because there were none available. But it is what it is. Let's see. Mary, hello. Richard, hello. Richard, congratulations. Those who know, Richard Atro is a regular viewer here. He's also a representative on the RTM now. So congratulations. Very engaged guy. I think he'll be a good addition. Often disagree with him, but I think he'll be a good addition. Shannon, hey, Steve, the article you posted yesterday about the federal COVID relief money to school districts, has that money been rewarded? You mean actually handed out? I don't know the answer to that yet. I can call either Robin, or that was a press release from Christine Cohen, so I can call her and find out. Elizabeth Smith, how are you? Good to see you. Steve, by Boeing. Yeah, I mean, Boeing, it's the same thing with American Airlines, right? That's going to come back, and the demand for planes will come back. So I don't think that's a bad buy. I don't know what it's selling at from a P/E ratio standpoint, but I'll take a look at that overnight. Shannon, I'll call Christine Cohen after this and try to find out. So, John, how are you from the Parthenon? Good to have you on, too. So, guys, I'm glad to be back. I'm sorry I wasn't on the last 2 days. I appreciate all the emails that came in. I was not sick. I was just, we had technical issues, and that's that. So, in the near future, one thing that I'll be doing, and part of our sponsorships with some restaurants and some businesses, we'll move the podcast on location. We've been asked by some restaurants to do it. We can try some food on air and talk, and then talk about business or what have you, the same type of thing. Maybe it might be a little longer those days, 45 minutes or so, and be live on scene at some restaurants and events in town. So, and hopefully more than just Brantford, in other towns as well. So I'm really glad to be back, and glad to be here. So a few things on the agenda today, starting with the stimulus package. I know everybody is most concerned with that, and I think from what I'm reading, the Democrats are likely to push through the larger package. Biden did say he was open to adjusting that $1,400 payment, not in the amount. The amount he can't adjust because his promise when he went to Georgia and tried to get, the Democrats won there, which gave him control of the Senate, was that he would get to $2,000. So the $600 came out under Trump, the $1,400 he promised. The question becomes, who gets it? And we've had this conversation before, that you have households that may have not lost work and it may make under $150 a year, but are making more than they made before. And so, do they really need that $1,500 or that $2,000 or that $1,400 or whatever it is, or do you make sure you give You focus on the families that are most in need, behind on the rent, behind on the mortgage, that sort of thing. There are many people, while we have unemployed, many people did extremely well. If you're in the medical field, first of all, if you're in a union, you did great. Firefighters, teachers, all that stuff, you kept a lot of your jobs. If you're a union in construction, you kept most of your jobs. If you're in construction at all, if you're an HVAC guy or electrician or plumber, you did really well. All the housing is spectacular. If you had Home Depot stock, you did great. If you're in the medical field, you did really, really well. So yes, we're focused on the people that are out. And with an economy, all it takes is a small group to be out to really bring down the economy. But the question becomes, there are a lot of households that are under that 150 threshold that are doing very well. And so, especially when you get to more southern states, Connecticut cost of living is a little bit higher, but you get to southern states, and we'll talk about this as part of that $15 minimum wage package of this. Those southern states, you make $130,000 a year as a household, you're doing really well. Like really, that's like 180, 190 in Connecticut. So should everybody based on just a flat 150 and under be qualified for this? And if you had two people in a household making 140 a year, you'd get $2,800. If you had some kids with you, you can get $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. So the Republicans are pushing back on that a little bit. Biden did say he's open to adjusting that. So that's one of the sticking points. The other significant sticking point is going to be the $15 minimum wage. And not because Republicans won't get on board with that, because they likely won't. But remember, that Senate is tied. And so in a tied Senate, there is a group of Democrats that are very moderate blue dog Democrats. And they may not be for a $15 national minimum wage. We talked about the issues last week or the week before about that a $15 minimum wage in Connecticut isn't crazy. It's not absurd. It's not going to drastically increase the price of your cheeseburgers or your groceries or whatever. Maybe a little bit. Labor costs will go up some, but it's not going to drive everybody crazy. Most of the income is fairly high. What do you do when the income is significantly lower? What do you do in southern states where the median income is in the 50s or lower? In one case, I think we saw 40s or maybe even 30s. It won't be that case, but say 40s or 50s, two people making minimum wage is $52,000 to $54,000 a year. That would be higher than the median income in some of those southern states. So businesses where cost of goods are much less, the cost of business is much less, cost of living is much less, it will drastically impact those businesses. So in Connecticut, we're like, no problem, $15 an hour, no problem. We already passed that law. It's going to happen no matter what. But states in the South are far more nervous about that. Businesses in the South are far more nervous about that. So you get some Democrats, especially Democrats that are in Republican-leaning states. So look at Democrats in states where Trump won, for example, or we're very close down south. They're going to have a tough time going to their constituents saying, from now on, your businesses now have to pay $15 an hour for that labor. And that is going to drastically increase the cost of a cheeseburger, of your groceries, what have you, when you do that. So remember, the United States of America is really 50 small countries. It's 50 small governments. And they all have very different constituencies, very different demographics, and the needs of those states is different. It goes back to the same arguments we've had since the beginning of our nation. States' rights versus federal government rights. Who should be determining some of these aspects of it? So often we talk about how things are so much more divided than they ever were. Not really. The argument's the same. Should the state decide it? Should the federal government decide it? And that fundamentally is the same argument when it comes to passing as part of a stimulus package a $15 minimum wage. I would not support a $15 minimum wage as part of this bill because I feel like it's using not a tragedy, but a pandemic, using an emergency to pass what has been part of an ideological plan for a while. The Democrats want to pass this to take advantage of a pandemic to push those things through. I don't agree that's the right thing to do. And the first stimulus package were negotiated last year. They were pushing through things on marijuana and other laws that had nothing to do with the pandemic that I had a problem with too. And a lot of those got removed. So the question is it almost ethical? Is it the right thing to do to say, listen, I have ideological beliefs. Here's a tragedy. Here's a terrible thing that's happening. We need help and we need aid, but let's push some things in there that do not have direct impact on that aid. So we saw Chris Murphy and all our representatives, all our state members, delegation. Oh, we need this. People need this now. They need that $1,400. The $1,400 is a very small portion of this. It's a tiny portion of this overall $1.9 trillion bill. And that $15 minimum wage is stuck in there, and it doesn't really mean it's going to help people through a pandemic. It's part of the ideology. So why are we pushing that in there? Michael, Laura Jean, how are you? Michael, I've always asked the question of how do we reduce the cost of living so $15 minimum wage is not required? Well, with inflation, you're never going to decrease the cost of living. It's going to go up. And you want some inflation. 1 to 2% inflation isn't terrible. That's just life. So, and that's happened since the beginning of time. So we're not going to decrease the cost of everything. There are so many economic factors. You know, if you look at an average Facebook page, and obviously I subscribe to a lot of political things on a Facebook page. Right now, it seems like the argument is how gas is higher under Biden, and therefore, you know, Biden is the reason for that. Not really. That pipeline being canceled is not the reason gas is higher. There are things that have such a bigger impact on our economics than who the president of the United States is. What happens in Saudi Arabia? What happens in Russia? What happens with oil prices and oil production? It just goes to basic economics. If oil prices drop, the people producing the oil say, let's drop the oil, less supply, the demand goes up, the price goes up. There's manipulation of the prices, and this isn't manipulation in a negative way. This is normal, right? If you're selling lemonade and there's a line out the door for your lemonade and there's a shortage of lemonade, you can charge more for the lemonade. If nobody's coming for your lemonade at $1 a piece, you could say, all right, let's lower it to 50 cents and more people come. We use the pricing of the lemonade and the production of the lemonade to determine what we get for it and the demand for it. We can adjust all of those factors. That's economics. That's what's happening with oil. It has nothing to do with Biden. But politically, it looks good, right? Oh, Biden's in office, and look at oil, and it was $2.20 a gallon, now it's $4 a gallon, or whatever it is. It's just crazy. We take these bumper stickers and throw it out there as being effective, and it's effective politically, but it's not accurate. It's not based on anything factual or intelligent. Laura Jean, Elaine said hi to Elaine. Elaine is the owner of Possessions, who's a friend of mine. Laura Jean is in many ways my adopted mom. So hi, Laura Jean, and she works at Possessions as well. Let's talk about something, though, that I saw posted today, and I think it's going to become a bigger issue going forward in the legislature. Now, we talk about Democrat versus Republican in this state a lot. The Democrats have complete control of everything. I've been critical of them having no ability to actually pass things that should be passed. In my opinion, marijuana, sports betting, tolls, for example, should have been passed. And I've given you the economic arguments for those things many times. I am not a marijuana user, but I think it should be passed. I am a sports bettor and will be a sports bettor. It should be passed because it's going to happen whether we pass it or not. It should not be exclusive to the tribes, and we've talked about that, and we'll go through that in a future podcast. But one of the bills passed today, and I'm going to read this to you, and the point overwhelmingly is, while we think about things in terms of Democrat versus Republican, what's really happening in Connecticut is our cities versus our towns. There's this narrative that the suburbs are wealthy and the city isn't. It's a completely false narrative. The same doctor that lives in Branford or Guilford, they're all the same doctors make the same amount of money that live in the high rises in New Haven. New Haven has plenty of very wealthy people, has plenty of very high-end property. There's some areas that are low. By the way, the same as Branford. Branford is just as diverse as New Haven would be. Branford has shoreline property, very expensive, multi-million-dollar homes, and then it has trailer parks. New Haven has very expensive shoreline property, very multi-million-dollar homes, unbelievable neighborhoods, and then they have their poor areas. But the narrative is our cities are poor and our suburbs are rich. It's a nonsense narrative, but what it's done is instead of making Democrats versus Republicans, it's the cities versus the suburbs. And we're seeing that. So this bill was referred to the Planning and Development Committee. Now, I'm going to say this with a massive caveat. Bills are initially proposed to start a discussion. Very few bills pass as written, short of like naming some memorial or something. But when the same bill is proposed every year every year and every year. The goal is that you get one more person to sign on and another person to sign on and another person to sign on. And eventually you start getting some support for a national discussion or for a statewide discussion. So this bill is introduced by Senator Looney and primarily representatives of cities. And I'm going to read this to you. An act concerning property taxes and affordable housing. It says that the general statutes be amended to, 1, require an additional property tax for any municipality in which less than 10% of all dwelling units are affordable housing. I have a hard time getting past the words affordable housing. And 2, use the revenue from such additional property tax to fund social services, affordable housing, and other support programs in other municipalities. So basically, every suburb town would add an additional property tax, doesn't give the amount, an additional, so 1 mil, half a mil, whatever it is, to your property tax, that would then go to use social services, affordable housing, and support programs in other municipalities, which is basically code for give the city some of your money. Now, there's some fundamental issues here with this argument. And we're going to go through these here. And this is why these bills, if they make you mad, they should make you mad. It's a nonsense bill. But this idea that our Branford and Guilford and Madison are somehow richer than New Haven is crazy to begin with. The idea that we need to redistribute wealth is crazy to begin with. But the fundamental democratic idea, which I agree with, which is a progressive tax rate where people who make more money should be taxed more, is an income tax idea. You pay more money on money you actually earn. Property tax is a drastically different thing. I've called it the Goodfellas tax. There was a scene in Goodfellas, which is just a great, great movie, where one of the organized crime guys wants to take over the restaurant. And when it's or partner with an owner of a restaurant. And how they describe it is, okay, now you have this level of protection, but sales are down, fuck you, pay me. Place gets robbed, fuck you, pay me. You have an issue, no revenue coming in, fuck you, pay me. No matter what happens, it has to get paid. Income tax, you pay tax if you make money. If you don't make money, you don't pay tax. Property tax, fuck you, pay me. You lost your job? Fuck you, pay me. You have other expenses? Fuck you, pay me. Your property tax bill still comes in. So it is fundamentally different to say, I believe in taxing the wealthier more when you're using the ideology of income tax, tax those that earn more and more money, and applying it to property tax. An additional mill on towns that have less than 10%. So people in trailer parks in Branford should have an additional property tax that should be reassigned to the cities? Does that make sense? Our condos at 140, 150, some at 90 or 100,000 should get a higher tax bill to go to the cities that has multi-million-dollar homes? The burden on somebody paying property tax exists no matter what. The entire ideology is out the window. Yes, if somebody makes $400,000 a year, do I have a problem with them paying a slightly higher tax? Of course not. If they pay 21% instead of 20%, who cares? They're going to yell about it. Politically, you have to yell about it. But that extra $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 over the course of a year, over $400,000 in earnings, no one's going to lose sleep over that. To the people making $800,000, $1 million, $2 million, do it. It's not the end of the world. And by the way, we've had tax rates that high, and the incomes and the economy still soared. The idea that lowering taxes is a massive economic boost is simply not true. It's not shown up over time, and it doesn't make sense economically. Historically, it hasn't shown up to be true. But raising property taxes is overly burdensome on everyone. It's a drastically different thing. And so the question that I have to ask myself all the time about Democrats, are you a Democrat because you're part of a party, or are you a Democrat because you believe in something? If you tell me you're a Democrat because you believe in something, and you believe in taxing wealthier people more, that makes sense. That is a contract, a societal contract we make as individuals. Society provides us with roads and security and police and fire, and we hopefully, making use of all those things, can make more money. And we say, listen, when we're making nothing, we don't pay taxes. And if we make a decent living, we pay some taxes. And if we make a really good living, if we make an amazing living, and I have to be taxed at a much higher rate, so be it. That's the contract we make as members of society that we take early on in our lives. Some people get free education. We get free education in our towns. We get free education, many for college. We get free police when we're born. We get free fire. We get all these services for free. Other people pay for them, with the understanding that if we are successful, if we've made use of the roads and the security and all of those other aspects that are given to us for free, that we start paying taxes when we start earning money. And then if we earn an excessive amount of money, more than people actually need to live, 200, 300, 400, 500,000, $1 million a year, then we say, let's be taxed higher so that people that are like us 20 years earlier can have those same advantages. That's the contract we as individuals make. So taxing the wealthy, okay, no issue with that. Saying to a town like Brantford, listen, all of your property owners get an additional tax so we can take it and give it to other towns. What ideology is that? What part of democratic ideology is that addressing? None. All that's happening here are people who happen to be Democrats in inner cities are trying to pass laws to take money from the suburbs and give it to the cities. That's not ideology. That's just, hey, listen, I want to pass a law where my neighbors have to pay an extra tax and give it to me. That's not ideology. That's not standing for something. That's not believing in something. That's nice. That's nonsense. It's crazy. And it'll keep getting proposed over and over and over again. Remember, the people that propose it are often the people that are secure in their jobs. Like Looney will never lose his seat as long as he runs. He's in a Democratic town. As long as he runs, he will never lose his seat. And the same is true for most of those people. So they keep putting this up saying, listen, let's put a bill up. Maybe it somehow gets traction. We're going to go a step further because we're going to talk about that affordable housing aspect of it. There is very few laws in Connecticut that are as dumb as the affordable housing laws. And only 2 states in the country have affordable housing laws. So it's nonsense. But here's the problem. It's saying towns that have less than 10% affordable housing, and they get to determine what is affordable housing. They're not saying affordable housing that fits in some sort of economic bracket and rents that are $1,000 or $1,200. No. We're saying they have to meet this economic bracket, but then they have to have a deed restriction on it. These additional rules that apply very, very selectively. Brantford is well over 10% affordable housing until we get to these stupid little rules. It's like saying, we're only going to count, for property tax purposes, we're only going to count 2,000 square feet in your house, but we're not going to count kitchens, bathrooms, living rooms. I mean, it's so ridiculous and arbitrary. And then they want to pass laws on top of that to determine taxes you should pay to go to other towns. That's a ridiculous bill. Will it pass? No. But the question is this. What if they come in and say, we don't want it to be a mill, but we want it to be 1/10 of a mill. We want it to be just a tiny amount of tax that goes on there. What if it's a flat tax? $100 per home goes towards the cities. Or if we say only homes that are over $300,000, we take that and go to the cities. But once that gets started, and that could be justified. Oh, it's just $100 on people who are $300,000 home or $400,000 home or $500,000 home. Then we can redistribute that. From an ideological standpoint, it's wrong. Because when it comes to property tax, we're not taxing the wealthy. We're taxing people who own property, whether they make money that year or not. What's the one reason that seniors often don't stay in their homes? They retire, and their retirement income isn't enough to cover the property tax. Even a wealthy person who has a very high-end home loses their job and suddenly gets hit with a $15,000 property tax bill. It's hard for them to pay it. I don't mind taxing people who actually earn the money. You made $400,000 one year and we tax you at a higher rate. You can complain till the cows come home, buddy. Come on. Let's go. You started a business and were incredibly successful. You took advantage of all of these things that we provide as government, as a society, and you made $500,000, $600,000. If I tax you at 28% instead of 27%, cry me a river. But to say that we should go to towns which are just as diverse as inner cities. Brantford has the Thimble Islands with multi-million-dollar properties, and it has trailer parks with the poorest of the poor. We have people that live in motels in the same town. And we want to consider New Haven poor? There is serious money being made in New Haven right now building high-rise luxury buildings. The apartments being built in New Haven right now, and these aren't, $800 a month apartments. $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month apartments being built in New Haven. Stop pretending you're poor. Stop pretending the suburbs are rich. Stop pretending you are a Democrat or you care about Democratic ideology or taxing the wealthy more by coming in and adding to property tax in other people's towns as an attempt to take money from towns and bring it to New Haven. And then the other final point is this. I want to say, I don't get to vote in New Haven. But if my money is going to go to New Haven, if suburbs of Danbury are going to spend money to New Haven, if suburbs of Waterbury are going to send money to New Haven, if suburbs of Bridgeport and of Hartford are going to send money, many towns that are bankrupt. Hartford's a disaster. We don't get to vote in those towns. So you want to tax Brantford and Guilford and Madison to their property tax, no matter whether they make money or not income tax, to their property tax. And we take that money and it gets redistributed to cities where we have absolutely no say in how we spend the money. Brantford is probably one of the best run economic towns there is. And on this podcast, we have Ray Ingraham, who's on the RTM, Jeff Villette, who's a Democrat on the Board of Finance. I think most people with a brain that have seen how Brantford is run will agree it is run extremely, extremely well. No question about it. The mill rate went down last year. I would love to have Jamie Cosgrove and Jim Finch and Joe Mooney and Jeff Villette and Ray Ingraham go to New Haven and look at their finances. And I want that to happen before we start sending our money, our property tax money, to the cities, because a couple Democrats who will never be voted out of office decided they want it. Now, will our representatives ever vote for that, Democrat or not? Probably not. I can't see Robin Comey voting for that. I definitely cannot see Sean Scanlon doing it. I don't see Christine Cohen doing that. Because it's not Democrat versus Republican. It's city versus suburb. But at some point, when these proposals continue to be made, as Democrats, we should stand up and say, this isn't our ideology. Adding to the egregious property tax, which has no forgiveness. If you get laid off due to COVID, due to anything, you still pay your property. You may get it deferred. You put off for 2 or 3 months, you got to pay it. But if one year you made $300,000 and you had to pay $80,000 in taxes, federal and state, and the next year you made $30,000 and you have to pay nowhere close to that in taxes, that makes sense to me. The more you made, the more you paid in taxes. And if the rate is slightly higher at the higher level, so be it. If a guy makes $2-3 million, if I go and trade a stock, if I had bought GameStop at $10 and sold it at $4.30, and I had 30,000 shares and I pocketed, $10 million, okay, I'm going to pay a higher tax rate. I have no problem with that. Because there was many, many years where I didn't pay anywhere near that tax rate. There were many years where there were grants for education and there were unemployed for a couple of weeks, and I had to jump on unemployment. And I took advantage of all these government systems that other people paid for, with the agreement that when I make more money, I pay into that. With property tax, that's not what we're doing. Property tax isn't forgiving. The idea that we should take money from suburbs and give it to New Haven, take money from suburbs and give it to Waterbury, take money from suburbs and give it, God help us, to Hartford, without any say in how those towns are run, while we're running our towns well. We're electing officials that are running our towns well. Branford got it right electing Jamie Cosgrove and having Jeff Follett and Joe Mooney on the Board of Finance. Branford got it right. So you want to take our money and give it to cities now and have no say in how they spend it. It's absurd. And if you're a Democrat, you have to ask yourself that very simple question. Do I stand for something? An ideology, a belief, a progressive income tax rate? Or do I stand for blind loyalty to a party? Because that's the issue here. And sometimes it requires us to stand up against our own party and say, I don't stand for that. I want no part of that. Get rid of it. That's a ridiculous law. Okay, guys, I want to thank you for joining me. I'm glad to be back. We will be back tomorrow, barring some sort of massive internet shutdown. But grateful to have all your comments, and thank you for all the emails the last couple of days. I was not sick. It was just internet connections. And we'll be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night.